a fast-paced equestrian world, obsessed with the need for speed, ambitious goals, or competition ribbons, have you ever thought to slow down with your horse instead? Diana Waters is the founder of The Power of Walk, helping horse owners and riders transform posture, movement and well-being by slowing down. What can we learn from slow walk work, in and out of the saddle? And how can we use the art of walking to rehabilitate a range of problems and improve our horse's performance? Let's jump in, shall we? Diana, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why is there power in slow walking?
So slow walking is a way to work with your horse that is completely gentle and force-free, but it's also incredibly effective. So I kind of liken it to if you're, say you have a child with really knotty hair, you can get the brush and yank it through the hair, and you might manage to unknot it, but it'll be all kind of damaged and the knots will come back. The child will be crying, everyone will be really unhappy. But if you start at the ends and just slowly untangle it, put some nice moisturizing conditioner in and just tease the bits out slowly and carefully, then not only do you have a happier child, you also have less damage to the hair, and in the long term, it's going to look much nicer.
Oh, isn't that so true? I think we've all got vivid memories, haven't we, of our hair being detangled after swimming lessons and how awful that would feel. I know you're really against that sort of push and pull effect with horses. You know, we see that, don't we, in different areas of the equestrian sector, whether it's at riding schools or whether, unfortunately, it's at competitions, or it might be at our local livery yard or, you know, our sole use yard. Wherever it might be, there sometimes still is that more forceful approach with horses. Why are you so against that fighting and kicking and pushing and pulling?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons why I'm against it. First of all, it's just not very nice for the horse or the person. And I think we all got into horses because we love them. And somewhere along the line, that tends to get lost. But the other problem with that way of riding is that we're not actually making any long-term changes. So, for example, if you have a horse that falls in on a 20-meter circle to the left and you just use more left leg, inside leg to outside rein. At the end of the lesson, you'll have an aching leg, the horse will have an aching side, but the next lesson, they're still going to be just as crooked because you haven't actually unraveled anything. So not only is it frustrating, it's also not really causing any long-term improvements. Whereas what I've seen with the slow walk work is because you actually get to the problem at its root, and because the horse is an active participant in the process, so you allow that time to pause, process, and for them to feel that different sensation in their body. So rather than constantly leaning against an inside leg which feels uncomfortable, instead they're taking a step back and experimenting with different ways of carrying themselves. Even though it might feel a little bit different, they're given plenty of time to actually think about how that feels, rather than to say, oh, this feels different, oh, but I'm still being pushed, so I'm still going to just push against it.
And you mentioned getting to the problem at its root. Diana, what problems can slow walking help with?
So it can help with pretty much any problem that you might come across, as long as it's not a big physical issue caused by an injury or a malformation or something like that. So what I commonly see is one of the first things that happen is that the horse's attitude will change. So I'll often get people, because I have my group Slow Walk Work on Facebook, where I help a huge amount of people with just little pointers. And I have so many reports back from people saying, wow, I thought my horse was lazy, but he isn't. He's actually come to life. And a lot of people saying, my horse now comes to the gate when he sees me, and he always used to run away. So you have that motivation, that improvement to willingness. And you also have, in terms of the physical issues, what I find is the most common problem is that horses develop tension and bracing in their bodies. So whether it's been the way that they've been trained or that they've had an injury in the past, They get certain muscles which become permanently switched on and tense, and they never release. So it's like the horse is in a constant low-level state of uncomfortable tension. So slow walk work is really good for really unraveling all of that tension and getting back to a completely clean slate. And once you've got to that place, you can then rebuild in a way that feels good for the horse.
That's so fascinating. There's so much to unpick here, but I've got to ask, why do you think the slow walk work helps things like the approach to our horses at the gate and actually that willingness to come to the gate?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that it just makes a horse feel good in their body. And I think another really big one is that it stops feeling like a fight. So, and a big part of this is in the self-awareness of the person as well, which I offer a lot of support for, because lots of us are just on a kind of treadmill of rushing around and trying to achieve. And slow walk work kind of forces you to take a breath and take a step back and to slow down and bring awareness to yourself. So it starts with being kind to ourselves. And when we're kind to ourselves, we open up that connection to the horses, because the horses are always there ready and waiting to connect with us. And when we open ourselves with kindness, it's kind of like, there you are. They can see us and they can connect authentically with us for who we really are. So they start to just feel much more positive about us as a person. And also, one of the other things that I notice is a lot of people who are high achievers and really wanting to do well with their horses will be so focused on the outcome that when they're working their horses, I'll notice, for example, I'll tend to say to somebody, did you feel that little moment of softening? And they will say, yes, but he's still not moving forward enough. So when I say, did you notice this nice thing? They'll tend to say, yes, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And once you can actually teach people to, both for themselves and for the horse, to look for the little bits which are enough, it's like the floodgates open, and one little noticing of a good thing leads to another and another. And suddenly it just feels much, much nicer. The horses are so attuned to how we feel. And so when we feel nice, they feel nice. And a lot of our horses are just waiting. They can see us. They can really see us for who we are. And they're just waiting for us to open ourselves up to them so that they can really connect with us. And they love that.
Oh, isn't that so true? I mean, how many Facebook posts, social media posts have we all seen where someone will say, I've got this horse and, horse for sale, doesn't come to call in the field, so best to leave a head collar on it. And actually, we never unpack in those situations, it seems, the reason why that horse doesn't want to be caught and doesn't want to come to the gate and actually flies away, runs away from the contact with the human, and actually thinking through, well, what are we giving that horse in our training sessions or even in our day-to-day handling?
Yeah, and there has to be something in it for the horse. And that's a really interesting topic as well, because obviously, first of all, you have to get the horse in the mindset for believing there will be something in it for them. So there's so many different ways to approach this, because sometimes I would encourage food rewards to start with, just as a way of bridging that gap and making the horse think differently. But I tend not to use food rewards in the training itself, because the training itself is so intrinsically motivating. If the horse is actually looking elsewhere for food, they don't notice so much the beautiful sensations in their bodies. But I think really, if you've got a horse that doesn't want to be caught, first of all, you have to give them a glimmer of an idea that something about being with us might be nice. And then you have to take their feedback and notice how they're responding to all of the things that you do. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, really. First of all, it's changing their initial thought, but then also making sure that they're enjoying what it is you're doing with them.
Talk to us about the human side of this, Diana, because So often with riding, we think of that need for speed, you know, whether it's in a lesson, whether it's in a riding school with our own horses, in competitions, we're always racing ahead to think about that canter, that gallop, that jump, cross country. Let's go faster. As you progress as a horseman or woman, you want to get to the next faster pace. How do you encourage and entice the humans to want to invest and try your slow walk work?
I think for a lot of people, they have their horse has become that they don't want to go faster, and then the joy is lost from it. So I think that's when a lot of people come to me. So people that are kind of enjoying galloping around on their horses don't tend to be that much interested in it, even though it can help them as well. So I think like one thing is that if your horse does enjoy going fast, I actively encourage people to incorporate that. But what I do encourage people to do is to go for a gallop up a hill in a straight line for fun, not to drill the canter in the arena. So you actually don't really need to drill anything. Even if you're wanting to work on something like tempi changes or something, it still doesn't need to be a 45-minute drilling session. So what I'm aiming to get to a stage of with all of my riding, and I believe that everybody can get to this stage, is that everything comes off light aids. So as soon as you're having to push a horse to get into canter or push a horse to stay in the canter, you can actually, with any horse, unravel things in a way that you don't have to do that anymore. And then the canter will feel so much more amazing. And also you'll feel better about it as well, because deep down, none of us want to be fighting our horses.
And talk us through, what is slow walk work? What does it look like in one of your sessions?
Okay, so I always begin with just simply walking beside the horse. So you can start off, if you want, the first few sessions, you can just start off in a head collar and lead rope, just walking with your horse. And in order to, what we're aiming for is a thing that I call oneness, which is where the horse and person are so attuned. And most of us, or a lot of us, have experienced this on some occasion, but not necessarily regularly. But we're so attuned that it's like the communication flows between us with no effort at all. So it almost feels like you can't actually quite tell that you asked the horse to do something. You just thought it and the horse did it. So we're aiming for that oneness from very early on as a basis. And in order to get that, first of all, we have to meet the horse where they are at without trying to change them. So when you watch horses playing together in a field, you'll often notice they'll mirror each other. So it's actually fascinating to watch them when my horses like to play in the rain, and they'll dance and they'll go kind of out in a symmetrical circle, mirror image, all sorts of really cool patterns. So they love to move together. And if you move with them, they start to notice, and that's the first step. So I just ask the horse to walk on, use the minimum aids possible, and once they're walking, allow them to walk at whatever speed they want. So if you've got, you can do this walking along a track or something, so you don't have to worry about steering either, or you can do it around the edge of an arena, but you just allow them to walk at whatever speed, and your job is to focus on yourself and then staying with them. So you focus on yourself by focusing on your breathing, on your connection to the ground. So you notice the ground beneath your feet. So you're really present. And you think about your posture. You think about how the horse how you like the horse to move, because they will mirror your posture. So you want to be feeling I always visualize a ballerina. So I'm nice and upright and graceful in my posture. My walking is smooth, and then I'll try and match my footfalls with the horse's hind legs, because if you match your feet with the horse's hind legs, that makes your head go up and down at the same rate as the horse's head. So then your arms are in line with the horse's head as well. So then you get that it almost feels like you're literally moving with the horse. So just by walking around with the horse, moving in sync with your legs in time, going up and down with the horse and breathing. And then you can take it a step further. So with your breathing, notice how many steps of the horse go with a breath in and a breath out, and then keep that rhythm. And that helps you to notice if you suddenly held your breath or sped up your breathing. And then stopping and starting with the horse, which is surprisingly difficult because usually, especially with walking on, we'll usually want to, if we're walking beside the horse, we'll usually want to walk a fraction before them. And what that tends to do is you start to walk, and then if the horse doesn't come with you, you kind of tip forwards a little bit. So it'll be like the horse falling on the forehand. And you have a little interruption in your gait. So if you can, before you start to walk, if you can communicate with the horse, and sometimes I'll use the whip just in a visual aid, or for a lot of horses, a voice aid is enough. But I'll often say to my horses, "Are you ready?" And then I check and they look ready. And then we go together at the exact same time. And the same with stopping. We're stopping at exactly the same time in balance. So it's just really very, very simple. Just walk to halt transitions, but done very, very well. So that's how I begin it. And with the riding, it's a similar thing. Allow the horse to walk on a long rein at their own speed. Do a body scan. So check that your toes are spread and relaxed. Check that the contact of your legs is just soft and passive all the way up from your calves to your thighs. Notice how the horse's belly swings from left to the right and allow your legs to move with that. Notice how the horse's back moves, so the left half and then the right half, and you let your seat bones move with that. You lift and poise your chest, your shoulders are soft, your jaw needs to be relaxed, the same as for the horse, your elbows, your wrists, your fingers, all of that, and your breathing. And I also like to focus on my heart and imagine a connection, a physical connection between my heart and the horse's heart. And then you're moving together, and that's your starting point.
And that really feels like the basics and the foundation of what our true partnership should be. And yet how often do we all get into the saddle, whatever stage we are, and race off into whatever activity we might be doing and focusing on what we might be achieving with our horse, whatever state of mind our horse might be in, whatever stage we might be in terms of ability. But actually, how wonderful if this was our first introduction to horses, whether we're children, teenagers or adults, and actually this is what you would do on a first riding lesson. Because should it not be about that oneness and that connection? And you mentioned sort of scanning the body and improving posture along the way.
Yeah. And I think the problem is, it tends to be in our culture that in riding lessons, and certainly for me through my instructor training, you would have got told off if you just sat on the horse and appeared to do nothing. So like, come on, ride forward, move forward, go, go, go from the start. And children are taught, let the horse know who's boss. So right from the start, we're bossing the horse around. And this is another reason why the horses love the slow walk work, because it's quite novel for them to actually be given space, and that their first reaction is often, what? No pressure? What? And then they sort of soften into oh, this is different. And immediately they're more aware and less defensive.
Yes, because actually thinking of it as well, whether you're with a coach, a trainer or an instructor, you usually get on board, you might walk a circle or walk the length of the school, and then it's up into trot and on with the lesson of the day, whatever it is you're focusing on. We don't actually spend much time in walk, do we, traditionally speaking? So how wonderful to give time to that first pace that we all start with at the first stages of our riding careers, but also at the start of our individual sessions as well.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about it is that often what people find is that suddenly all the things that they needed to work on, they don't need to work on anymore. So they had been wanting to work on, let's go back to our other example of my horse always falls in. By the time we get to trot, there's no problem. The horse isn't falling in anymore. There's nothing to fix, because we fixed it all far back before at the stage that it began. And that can often be happening at the level of the rider body scan, because there's a little asymmetry in the rider. So it could be something as simple as that.
Wow. So what is it about that walk work, and what do you do within the walk work that can fix these ailments, these bad habits and these mistakes that we're making, both us and the horse?
So once we've once we've really worked on that synchronization and that oneness, we start to add elements to it. So I always begin with in-hand work and then do the same thing ridden. But the first thing that I will do is to begin to ask the horse to slow down a little bit. And that has to be done in a way that the horse feels safe. So it's not about restricting or holding the horse back. It's when the horse starts to take a breath, they will, if they had been kind of charging along, they will start to naturally slow down a little bit. And when they do that, I'll start to work on picking up the contact and letting it out again. So most horses, when they're first trained, aren't actually taught to accept the contact. You just pick up the reins and go, and you might sort of teach them how to stop and start, but they're not taught what to actually do with the contact. And whether that's with a bit or a bitless, there's a certain way that they need to be when you pick up the reins. And so what a lot of horses will do is they will brace the jaw and they'll brace the muscles of the underneck when you pick up the contact. So I take it right back to basics, and a lot of horses will begin with a lot of tension in their necks, and I'll work with that in the halt. So I'll feel by touch, you can feel the hard parts of the neck that feel physically hard to touch. I'll rest my hands on, I'll ask for just the tiniest bit of movement to bring their awareness to it, and then I'll release. And often you'll begin with, you'll get a big stretch down just in halt, and sometimes they'll turn to one side or the other, and sometimes they'll come up and they might do a big yawn. And I'll begin with, sometimes I'll do a whole session of that, or even a few sessions of that. And what you'll find is that the muscles beneath your hands start to soften. You can feel them physically softening. And when the muscles are soft, the horse is ready to be asked to pick up a little bit. So when they pick up, they need to stay soft. So you pick up just a little bit and then you let out again so that they know that they can stretch. If when you let out, if they don't reach forward, but instead they drop their head and tuck in, then they've braced again in their neck. So then I'll either ask them to lift a little bit more to see if that unhooks it, or if it doesn't work, I'll come back to halt or walk and do some of the touching halt and walk to release those muscles again. So I won't ask for anything else until the horse is able to pick up in softness and lightness when I ask them to without becoming heavy, and when I release the reins to draw the nose forward and open the angle underneath the gullet. And once you've got that full mobility of the neck and the poll, then you've already start to have the beginnings of collection. And throughout all of my work, I incorporate stretch. So stretch for me is not just a release or a reward. It's a part of keeping that mobility and softness in the collection as well. So that is kind of throughout all of the work. And once the horse can do that, I then start to work on the straightness. So straightness sometimes is easier to work from the saddle than in hand. But what I'll do, I usually start very basic with just leg yield and shoulder in. And I actually do this regularly on foot myself without the horse, because the way that I teach these in hand is actually via that oneness. So basically, if I know how something feels in my body and I get that feeling into my body, the horse will mirror it. So people say, what aid do you use for leg yield? And the way that I show people is I get them to walk through the leg yield. And I say, this is what the leg yield feels like. If you can find the synchronization with your horse, you will be able to just think of it and do it. And people are really amazed by that. If it doesn't work, we can add like a whip touch. And I use the whip only in a stroking, not a tapping. So stroke the whip up the side to guide the hind quarters across. And you can use the outside rein to bring the shoulders across for shoulder in. So you can use those aids as well. But the ultimate aim is for you to be just moving through those movements together. So the shoulder in and leg yield can pretty much straighten the horse in every way that's needed. And when you're riding the horse, so I'll often introduce them on the ground first. And then when you're riding the horse, you can really feel. And the main way you can feel is what happens to your body and seat. So if you get thrown over to one side, generally speaking, for example, if you get thrown to the left, you need to work the horse more on the left rein to begin with, because what's happening when you're thrown over to the left is that the rib cage is rotating in the wrong direction. So that's like a horse, if you're on the right rein, A horse would be trying to kind of bolt out and fall out to the left, so the head and neck could bend to the right. It would feel like it was easier to bend the horse to the right, and your body is thrown to the left. And as soon as your body is thrown out to one side, you're no longer synchronized with the horse. So what I would then get the rider to do is to change the rein onto the left rein, which will put you back in the middle. And then from there, you can actually start to stretch the outside of the horse, the right side, which is what's causing the problem. So I would tend to have people working on the left rein initially with lots of stretch, pick up, and a bit of shoulder and a bit of leg yield, and not changing the rein until they feel straight. And then when you change the rein, you'll often do just one round on the right rein and then go back to the left again. So I don't tend to work evenly on both reins unless the rider is able to stay in the middle. So the way that I see it, as soon as you've lost that being in the middle, you need to go back a step. So I always say return to synchronization. So if you are crooked on the horse, the first thing you need to do is to get straight on the horse in the easiest way possible, which is often to change the rein. So you don't want to get straight by kind of trying to push the saddle over and stuff like that, because the horse's body or your body or both are not straight. So first of all, you need to get aligned with one another.
Oh, this is fascinating. Diana, talk us through. I find it really interesting that you say many of your community, and you've built up a huge community of over 21,000 people on your Facebook page, which is really impressive and shows that need for the slow walk work that you're creating. But you mentioned that many sort of come to you because their horse can only walk and they need to go back, slow it down because there's an issue that they're trying to fix or that they want to work on. But what would you say to those listening who are happily cantering and galloping about the cross-country course, or they're jumping, or, they're out happy hacking and actually almost need to be persuaded to slow it down a bit to see the magic? What would you say?
Well, I think you actually have to be ready and in the right place to want to do this, because it is absolutely beautiful work. But if it's not appealing to you, there's no point, because people will say, my horse finds it boring and things like that. That often is because they just can't quite see they just might not be in the right space in their life, or perhaps they're just having fun galloping around there's nothing wrong, Sometimes people don't want any more, Sometimes if the horse is happy, if they're happy, if they're doing things they enjoy, there's not necessarily a need for it. But if you're having any problems at a faster pace, then the walk is going to be the thing which makes the biggest difference in the gentlest way, and it makes the most long-lasting difference.
Does it make you sad as a trainer that it takes for there to be an issue to make the rider or the owner want to slow it down? Would you love it if you had people coming to you because they wanted to improve their galloping, their jumping, their whatever they might be doing at a high octane pace, and actually be interested in taking it back to that slow step to improve bond and oneness, as you mentioned, with the horse?
I mean, I think that doesn't make me sad, because if they're happy and their horse is happy, that's all I care about. What does make me sad is when people have a problem that they want to resolve and they don't have the right support or culture around them, and they have been told, you need to push him forward, you need to use more leg, you need to add spur, you need to do all of these. That's what makes me really sad, because I have quite a few people that work with me that are sort of keeping their horse at a livery centre or a public place where there are other people who feel self-conscious because it looks like they're doing nothing, and people can be judgmental. And when you're trying to learn something new and you're trying to teach yourself, because it's hard to have the confidence in yourself as well when you're sort of not sure and you're wanting to try something, but people are watching and making comments, and it's just, I find it sad that it's not well known enough, which is why I'm really trying to spread the word, because throughout my instructor training, I never heard of this type of riding. I would have failed my exams straight away if I'd have done this. And just that it's not something that people know about or that people see as a legitimate way of doing things. And so if you have a horse that's having trouble, often I'll often see people, trying to do what they think is right for the horse. They've been told they need to tap the whip to create more activity, and yet the horse is too crooked to have that activity. And the person doesn't really want to keep tapping with the whip, but they want their horse to be okay. And people have told them that's what they have to do to make their horse okay. So that's what really makes me sad. Like when I see people cantering around joyfully, I'm just happy for them. I don't care whether they've done slow walk work or not.
You just want people to be happy in general. And you mentioned that judgment, and it's really hard in the equestrian industry, isn't it? Whether on a low level or a competition level, that outside critique and those whispering ears, either at the side of the show ring or, as you mentioned, at the livery yard. Yeah. Do you ever talk to your clients and your community about that and about that judgment and how to cope with it?
Yeah, I think in my community, there's a lot of, especially in the smaller study group community for my course, there's a lot of support that we all offer one another, because it's a very common thing for people to experience. And even just the mindset for ourselves, a lot of people will need constant reassurance that this is okay, because sometimes it can feel like nothing's happening. So often, especially when a horse has been pressured their whole life, when you first begin with slow walk work, there can be a lot of just standing. Some people have stood like for 45 minutes and then they said, okay, I've stood with my horse for 45 minutes. And then I went the next day and he wanted to stand again. And, is this okay? Am I creating something really bad? And people just need that support, through that type of thing. And also a lot of people, struggle within themselves to slow themselves down. It's a very hard thing to do, and will start to feel impatient. And as soon as you start to feel impatient, that's conveyed to the horse. They can feel that pressure, even if you're trying. And some people are trying so hard to do the right thing, and it's not quite working because they just felt that little bit of impatience, which is completely human. So a lot of it is about finding ways to cope with that and finding ways to incorporate that, and not to say, oh, well, you need to be calm all the time, you need to be slow all the time. We need to find ways that make sense and work for every single individual and their horse, and it might look different for everybody. So we're constantly supporting one another within that community, and trying to find, sometimes it's good to just go and work somewhere different where there's nobody watching, even if you just go out up and down the road or something like that, or find a field somewhere. There's so many things that can get in the way of the psychological side of things.
And actually, you mentioned, walk and the impatience for both horse and rider, because walking in our training sessions usually is the gateway to going faster, isn't it? And our horses are impatient to get going or to move on to the next thing. So are we, aren't we? Kind of expecting that we'll move on to the trot or whatever we might be working on. And so actually you've got to change both your mindset and the horses that this is what we are doing and it's our sole focus.
Yes, and with the horses, it can be confusing for people as well, because you don't always start to slow down the horse very early on in this. So for some horses, they need to be allowed to walk fast for quite a long time before they'll start to be interested. So it can only work if they're interested. It's no use a horse that really wants to trot and then trying to make them walk slower. You have to be creative and find just little things that you can do. But funnily enough, even some of my horses that I've worked with that are the most forward and excitable can now be the ones which want to stand for ages with their head down, because they found that other kind of side of things. And you can end up with a really beautiful sort of situation where those horses will stop and go slow, or they'll go fast with no kind of obvious preference for either. But yeah, you have to meet people, and horses have to be met where they are. And that is such a key foundational aspect of it.
And I've got to mention and just circle back to your beautiful descriptions of your horses playing and dancing in the rain and pulling shapes and carting off in all sorts of different directions and mirroring each other. Because for anyone who has watched their own horses or horses at the livery yard do that, I mean, it's such a beautiful display, isn't it, of emotion. And our little miniatures will sort of, like you say, mirror and almost do like what you would expect plain aerial display planes to do in the sky, and sort of cross over at a gallop and then spin back round at speed. And it's often those moments, isn't it, where we aren't actually planning a training session, or we're not actively doing something with our horses, where there's a real connection and something special in the air.
Yeah. And when you when I call them glimmers, when you look at your horse and you just feel this little glimmer of joy, those moments need to be noticed, because that's what it's all about, and it can get lost. And I think I often have the thought about riding, why would a horse enjoy being ridden? Because to me, there's no enjoyment in riding a horse that doesn't enjoy being ridden. And I always think back to my childhood pony Jimbo, who loved being ridden, I think. He loved to go fast. He loved to gallop and jump. And I've often noticed as well with children riding ponies, there's often more of a pure joy for both the child and the pony. So I think there are two aspects to why horses enjoy being ridden. One is exactly what you've described with the mirroring and the synchronization. So it's like dancing with a partner when two people are just moving together. Just the movement together can feel joyful. And also horses really kind of absorb our emotions quite a lot. So if we are purely joyful, the horse is often purely joyful as well. And the other thing is that some horses just enjoy the confidence that we bring to them. So, just by the fact that we're the one making the decision, we're the one looking out for danger, and they can just relax, that can feel nice for them as well. So I think that's, and I think watching them and spending time just looking at them and thinking how beautiful they are can all just kind of feed into this.
Diana, where did your love for the slow walk begin? What inspired you to start this journey?
Well, when I did my instructor qualifications, I did up to my BHS stage 4. At some stage during that, I had realized that it really wasn't for me, but I had a kind of idea that I wanted to carry on and do it so that I was credible and maybe I could make changes from a place of being a qualified instructor. But when I did my stage 4, it kind of reached a point where it just didn't feel right anymore. And I wrote a letter to the British Horse Society to sort of say about my experience. And in particular, the fact that at the time that I did it, which was about 20 years ago now, but you kind of, in order to pass an exam, you had to kind of really just force a horse into an outline with your legs and hands, because you had 20 minutes per horse. You had to ride a horse that you hadn't ridden before. And I felt that it was probably in part the nature of the exam system that was a problem, because of the fact you had to get these tangible results in a short space of time. So I'd written to the BHS, and I was contacted by Heather Moffat, who read the letter, and she invited me over to her yard to meet her and her horses. And at the time I had started thinking, because in all of the BHS manuals and everything, the way it's described is quite nice. So they say, they encourage a soft, light hand and all that sort of stuff. But then it doesn't seem to be taught in the same way. So I was starting to wonder whether maybe you couldn't really ride in a nice way. It was just something people sort of said, but you couldn't do. But when I went to Heather's and watched her ride and watched her working students ride, it was beautiful. Like the horses just looked joyful, and everything was just like you couldn't see the riders moving. They just seemed to glide with the horses. There didn't seem to be any aids or anything. It was just, and so I knew from that, that's how I wanted to ride. So I went and trained with Heather. And while I was with her, I rode her horse, Sudi, who does a really beautiful school walk, and she encourages us to begin the sessions in this beautiful, slow, floaty, lofty walk. So where instead of warming up sort of walk, trot, canter, that's how you warm up. So you start in walk and you just glide around with the horse, really. It just feels like you're gliding and at one with the horse. It's just so beautiful. I struggled more with the trotting and cantering aspect of my training, because I feel like I'm not like a naturally talented rider. Heather was brilliant. She has simulators as well, so she worked loads on my position and synchronization, and I improved a lot with that. But it was really the walk that I connected with, and I was just wondering, why isn't this taught? Why isn't this something that I've never heard of it before? And then I've experienced it, and it's just beautiful. And when I went home and tried it with my horses and my clients' horses, and realized that anyone can do it. And it's not like because I did think sort of at first going to Heather's, maybe it's because our horses are so highly trained, and, they're Lusitanos, maybe only Lusitanos can do this. But when I found that all horses of all stages of training, you can slow the walk and it's not the same level of school walk that Sudi was doing, but it's just something a lot more beautiful. And then I ended up playing around a lot with it and finding out all of these other things that you can do within that walk. So that's what kind of really got me converted to it. And I hadn't been aware of how much impact it can have. So I noticed that my mare, who I'd only done in hand with because she wasn't started under saddle yet, but she had cow hocks, which straightened out permanently within a few weeks, never went back. She was really crooked through her body, and she now trots straight with no crookedness out in the field. That crookedness has never returned. I had a horse that I worked who was an ex-race horse, and he had a very upside down thin ewe-neck, and he developed like beautiful top line. And an older horse that I worked with who had a very bad sway back, his back lifted and straightened. He's 29 years old now, and it's just stayed the same without further work. So all of these things I discovered just by chance were happening through the slow walk work. So
what is it about that slow walk work that is helping their physicality?
So because you begin with unlocking all the muscles, so you've got a clean slate and the horse can move in any direction. And then because you've built this connection and trust, they will try something a little bit different from what they usually would. And then when they try it, so for example, you ask the horse to lift a little more than they usually would with a soft neck, and then you allow them to pause. And during that pause, they have a chance to process how it felt in their body. And usually it felt good because you've improved the posture. So for example, in the case of Rocky, the older horse with the sway back, when I taught him to lift and raise his rib cage and engage his thoracic sling, it made his back straight. So he would have probably had the pain from the dipped back and kissing spines, vertebrae rubbing together. When he's lifted and straightened the back and then we paused, he was able to think, oh, that feels better. And then when you turn him out and his back hurts a bit and he's like, hang on a minute, what was it? Oh, it was that. Oh, that feels better. So because we're not saying, okay, I want you to bend this way. And they're like, oh, okay. Can I stop now? It's not like that. It's more like, I'm just going to help you unlock everything. And then I'm going to suggest something. And I want you to just experience how that feels. And if it feels nice, you can use that. And so they'll go and use it out in the field. And
amazing. So you're actually teaching the horses to help themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. How powerful is that you can actually aid the horse and give them tools? That feels so wonderful that actually these horses can then use that in their own time instead of being in pain and restricted in all aspects of their lives in the stable, in the field, in the arena. Yeah. And I've got to ask as well, Diana, do you think that, us as humans, if we have an injury or if we get unfit, we slow it down, don't we? And we start walking, and we might walk before we swim, or we might walk before we cycle or run. Yeah. Do you think it's the same with horses, that actually build up their fitness, slow them down, instead of thinking of fitness work as trotting and doing hill work or canter circles, that actually lots and lots and lots of walk on repeat is what it takes?
Well, yes, it is, because the thing is, we're really increasing the efficiency if we can. So, for example, I'll give you another analogy. So if a hose is kinked and you just turn on the water with a really high pressure until it kind of forces it through, then that will unkink the hose. But then when you turn the hose off again, it will kink again. But if you just go and unravel it and unwrap it, then the water can flow through much more easily. So that's why as well, we get that increased forwardness. So many people say their horse is lazy, and then they did slow walk work, which seemed counterintuitive, but I've sort of talked them into it. They do the slow walk work, and now suddenly their horse isn't lazy anymore. That's just because we've unkinked everything so the energy can flow through, because horses have a desire to move. So as long as they're out in turnout and having the opportunity to move, if you have helped them carry their body better, they will move more and become fitter. So obviously if you're doing eventing, you need to be cantering and galloping and things as well for the cardiovascular fitness. But if you want your old horse to be healthy, you can get all the fitness you need through slow walk work. And also because often when a horse is crooked or something like that, they could be compensating for an injury or for pain. So we have to be careful about unraveling it. But the way that we do it in the slow walk work, because they have the time to process and to feel whether it feels good, and we, they do have the option to say no, and it's low impact, and they can try it very gradually. So they can take their time. Like I broke my toe once, and after it was better, I still was limping because it felt like it was still going to hurt. So by just really slowing things down, you can build the horse's confidence that it's not going to hurt anymore. So,
oh gosh, it does affect you psychologically, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Us and our animals. Do you also work with horses that have been through difficult backgrounds, past traumas, and have psychological issues?
Yeah, I'm not one to say slow walk work is going to fix everything, not anything. Hopefully it will fix some things, but it's not going to fix everything. So I do commonly have, usually when a horse has those severe psychological things that aren't going away, there's usually a physical cause for it. So the most common ones that I see are hoof pain and neck pain, probably related to ECVM and things like that. Those are the ones that I see most often. And usually if a horse doesn't have those physical issues, the slow walk work will calm any psychological problems that they've had, because it just regulates the nervous system. It slows everything down. It makes them feel good. It rebuilds that connection, that trust. So usually if there's no physical issues, people will quickly see an improvement. And for some people, there are physical issues, but the slow walk work is helping them nevertheless to some extent. But I am realistic, and I do say to people, if it's plateauing and you're getting setbacks, then there's something else happening there. And, we have to be honest with ourselves about that it might not always be fixable. But what I can say, which is the beautiful thing about slow walk work, is that it's not going to make things worse. It might make things the same, or it might make things better, but it's always worth a try.
Can you talk us through one of the horses, Diana, that have stayed with you, that have been transformed through slow walk work? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I told you about Flicker already with all of her little physical things. I did actually, when probably not a horse that stayed with me, because I've just got the two horses of my own, which are Flicker and Vikinger. Vikinger is actually, he might be a good one, because he is a little Icelandic. He's gaited. So Icelandic horses have this gait called the tolt, which is like a running walk. He's a little character. So he's only 12, 3 hands high. When he first came, he was very crooked. And his conformation, he's got very short legs, and he's really big and bulky up front and built downhill. He's also hypermobile, being an Icelandic. So he would kind of cart off. He liked to gallop fast down hills and be difficult to stop. Wouldn't really bend. He didn't tolt at all. So the tolt is a natural gait for Icelandic horses, but he didn't tolt at all when I first had him. I wasn't sure if he would be able to tolt. But I started off with wanting to address the kind of charging on and galloping down hills. And actually with him, he was bitless when I first had him, and I started off bitless with him. But what I found was happening was that because of what he would do, where he would just suddenly lean and charge, he was ending up with a dent on his nose from the noseband. And I could, he's quite braced in the neck, and I didn't want to increase any aids. And I tried the slowing, the things that I usually do. It wasn't particularly working. And I actually ended up putting him in a bit, and I often use a Pelham bit, which people find controversial, but the way that I use it, because what it does, if a horse is braced in the jaw, it's a straight, I always use one with a straight or a curved mouthpiece, not a jointed mouthpiece. One thing that I find is that there is a bit of a misconception that a jointed snaffle is the kindest bit, but I have personally found that the fixed mouthpiece, horses often prefer that because it has less movement. I usually use Bomber's Happy Tongue, which is a shaped mouthpiece, which allows plenty of space for the tongue. So it's a smaller amount of bulk in the mouth, and it sits really comfortably to begin with. And then the way that I use it, from the ground, I'll rotate the shanks, I use an elastic curb chain, not a metal, brings the curb chain up into the chin, and that creates a reflex for the horse to chew. So when the horse chews, they release the jaw. When the jaw releases, there's like a whole cascade of release through the body. So in the halt, I'll rotate the shanks until the jaw releases, and then I'll let them go again. And the horse will release the jaw, the poll, all the way down the neck, through the back, and then the hindquarters are softer as well. So I did that with him. And then I did a lot in hand with him because I didn't want to ride him in a bit until he was really confident with the bit, because I didn't want him to do the same thing and hurt himself by pulling and leaning and galloping downhill. So I taught him to do that, and then I taught him to lift and stretch, as I described before. I taught him shoulder in and leg in, and he really loved doing all that stuff. So I taught him all that in the Pelham. And then when I rode him, he was much softer and lighter. He wasn't wanting to gallop downhill. And the first time, he actually offered tolt naturally one day. He was like, wanted to go. I let him go, and he just went off in this beautiful, smooth tolt. So, and his canter became really elevated and uphill. He just became a lot more, still like really speedy, but without the kind of, downhill tank leaning type feel.
Wow. How did that feel for you, seeing that transformation in front of you?
Oh, it's just really cool. And I just enjoyed the work so much, and so did he. I enjoy the process. I don't just enjoy the end result. I love the process. So we got to a stage, where, I wanted to see how much I could reduce my aids. So I ditched the whip, and I could do, I still had this bridle on, but I could not be holding the reins and get him to do shoulder in and travers, and just beautifully connected, beautifully light. So it's just really lovely. And he's my kind of experiment horse. So I'm still kind of playing around with trying to teach him piaffe and stuff like that. Just really, really enjoying it.
Oh, I love that, Diana, and I love the beaming smile across your face. You can tell that you love the process, as you mentioned, but also that connection to your horse, that relationship with your horse as well, as you go through the motions and the movements and make that progress as well. You can tell it's more than just about that physical agility. It is about the bond that you're creating along the way.
Yeah.
And you've built this community who are joining you in your passion for the slow walk work and all the transformations that go along with it. Why for you is it so important that there is a community to turn to, especially in our current society that can feel quite isolating?
Well, I think we need to change things. So a community is needed for change, and we need to support each other, because if you're the only person doing it, you just feel too much doubt. So part of it is about, getting the word around, but also in my community, I really highly value kindness. So I very carefully monitor it's quite a big Facebook group now, but I very carefully monitor it to kind of create a culture of kindness and support and encouragement and looking for the good and helping one another. And I think when we're like that to each other, we're like it to the horses as well.
Oh, that is such powerful words. And you mentioned, I love this, it's a community for change. What one change do you hope to see and hope to make with the community that you're building?
I think that people's go-to is to stop and pause, slow down and listen to the horse. That's the first go-to as a common approach, instead of the first go-to being ride forward and ask more.
Diana, it has been amazing talking to you and so inspiring. You're going to stick around and come in our members zone and answer some listener questions. So you'll have to join if you want to watch the next part of our interview. But for those who are listening, Diana, and intrigued and want to be a part of your community, how do they find you?
So you can find me on Facebook. If you just type in Slow Walk Work, it's a Slow Walk Work group. And you can also visit my website, which is thepowerofwalk.com, all one word. And on there, you can also find links to my Facebook and ways to contact me as well.
Thank you so much for coming on Curious Equestrian.